Hey, everybody. Today I have with me the fabulous Kate Willett. Kate is a comedian, actress, and writer who has appeared on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. She's been on Netflix's comedy lineup. She's toured with Margaret Cho, all the things. And I'm excited particularly to talk to Kate about her recent special Loopholes and
Thank
also
you.
the Audible original Dirtbag Anthropology, both of which I have watched, listened to, loved, have loads of questions, particularly as it relates to using personal politics in your work, because it's something that you do so brilliantly. It's something I find kind of scary, and I've got lots of questions about. But
Sure.
before we dive in, is there anything else you'd love people to know about you and your connections to comedy?
You know, that's so I don't really know what to say. So let's just get in the questions and
Yeah.
I'll add something if it comes to me.
Yeah.
All I can
Okay.
think of saying is like stuff that's like dumb, like I love my cats, I don't know.
Oh, it's never dumb to love your cat.
Yeah. I was just thinking about them because whenever I do like yoga stretching on
Yeah.
the floor, my cat literally like loves to like climb on top of me while I'm doing yoga. He
Oh,
loves getting on there. It's like it's a ride or something for him. I don't know.
yeah. But that's good. I mean, people pay to do goat yoga and all kinds of things. So you've got your own
Yeah.
little personal trainer. Oh, I love
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Amazing. So I wanted to start with the Audible original Dirtbag Anthropology.
Thank you.
And I've got loads of questions, but I'm aware for people who haven't listened, it would be lovely just if you could give a little bit of a sense of what either the concept is or what the impetus was behind it, so they kind of know what world we're in.
I wrote this book in 2020. It was kind of a little bit after the, main like height of Me Too, and I was
Yeah.
exploring what would like a kind of positive version of masculinity look like. And I decided to pursue that through interviewing men that I knew.
Mm.
And also some I didn't know, but I just thought were really interesting based on their work, that they had done. And so I wrote an audiobook of like essays that also included interviews within it as well. It's kind of a mix of like memoir and research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really, really delightful mix. And I really love listening to it because I really loved hearing like your writer voice and your performer voice, but also like you actually like physically the other voices, like your dad. What do you think they brought to it? Because some of them are comedians, but some of them aren't. But like it would be so different without those voices, I think. What did they bring to it?
I think it was to me like I love those parts too, and those are everyone's favorite parts.
Yeah.
I think that there's just like something really honest about people who are not professional performers or have not constructed a public image in any way, and they're just like gonna say what they
Yeah.
think, especially because the questions that I was asking the guys that I talked to were very personal, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. They were. And the words that you've used already, like personal, honest, those kind of words, like we might assume that all comedy has them, but it doesn't, not in the way that you kind of root your work in things that are really genuine. Everything seems to be something you're so genuinely curious about, and it's really personal to your life. So I'm curious about how you manage that process for yourself. Because, for example, I'm super interested in comedy, but I'm writing fiction. And I feel like in some ways it's both like really true and you get some distance because you could like things are fantastical or, there's sort of otherworldly elements. Yours is so rooted in your life. Is that I'm trying to ask, like, is that something you've always done? And how did you get comfortable with that, if not?
Well, I mean, with like this book, with this audiobook, it was a little
Yeah,
different because everything I said was true. And, even the stuff that I like wasn't quite sure about, it was like, okay, we have to fact check it. Did he really get
right,
his bike stolen three
right.
times or was it only two? Like in a memoir, you have to be like as honest as you can possibly be, I mean, like you may misremember, something about what someone said, 20 years ago or whatever, but you have to really be, factual to the absolute best of your ability, like including fact checking for any broader claims that you're making. But for stand up, like my comedy is personal, but I'll also change something if it's going to be funnier if I change it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I mean, like I do write stuff that is personal, but at the end of the day, like stand up is more of a, you just take comedic liberties with things, I think, there's no requirement for truthfulness in exactly the same way. But that said, I think one of my main motivations as an artist is like, I do like to make more personal art and express myself. And, like that's just always kind of been like the original source of my desire to make creative work. So it wasn't like a thing that was like hard to get into. I had to, like, that's just always what made me want to do it in the first place.
Yeah, I love that. And there's a line in Dirtbag Anthropology that I really loved. The line that I wrote down was, "What comedy possesses on its best day is humanity." And I thought that was such a really lovely line, particularly as we think about it in relation to personal politics or other kinds of politics. I wondered how you think about that as it fits with politics in your comedy.
I mean, like my actual stand-up isn't that political. Sometimes it is, but not that much. I do end up writing a lot about relationships, and lately in the newer stuff I've been writing a lot about my relationship with religion, and like the kind of like Jesus brainwashing I got when I was a kid. Because that's been like sort of, there's just like things that you think about at various times in your life. And I've been thinking a lot about that lately, of how like, being indoctrinated in a certain way ended up like shaping how I see the world, and like with politics, I don't know. I just, for me, like I'm a very politically active person, and so that shows up in my work. But like, with stand up, I don't like, people don't really most of the time like certainly nobody wants to like hear like jokes about like Trump anymore or something like that. We're all so sick of him. Like people in the US, I don't know if it's the same in the UK, but are very sick of like political humor after 4 years of that guy doing really dumb stuff all the time.
Yeah, and it's that funny thing where we use I feel like the word political gets used for so many things now. It's like, I don't know, in the UK, like a lot of people that I know like talk about politics with a capital P being, like you say, like Trump and anything else that's going on like with like coming up to elections in the UK. But then also like politics with a small p being seeming to mean like everything, any kind of like whiff of feminism or looking at sexuality or religion kind of gets put in that bucket too. So I'm kind of interested
that makes sense.
And how you think about that. So you've mentioned religion in and you've also sort of mentioned like wanting to look at masculinity. So was it for you, like when I say a word like feminism in relation to comedy, what does that bring up or mean to you? Because like quite purposely in Dirtbag Anthropology, like it seems to be really looking at masculinity. How do you see them sort of fitting together or not? How do you feel if someone calls you a feminist or a feminist comedian?
Yeah, I am a feminist, and it's always been important to me, but what it has changed a lot, what it means to me has changed a lot over the past few years. Like I think when I pitched this book, like probably back in 2017, 2018, I was really thinking, just kind of a lot of stuff like, abortion and, like women being, equals in our careers and having the same opportunities and stuff. And all that is extremely important to me. Like, obviously, I think that women should have all the rights, but I do think it is much broader, and that we've kind of seen like, we've seen kind of feminism sort of like start to be discussed in more like nuanced ways over the past, probably like 8 years, especially, and it will continue to, I think like a lot of the time, like in the mid 2000s, in the mid teens, 20 teens, I would say it was a lot about like individual women being successful. And now for me, like, I think thinking about it more, broadly in terms of like, like justice and freedom and rights like for everyone, so like for me, it's like thinking about how, if we had like housing for everybody, like if we had a guaranteed right to housing like in our country, that you probably would see like a lot less women being forced to stay in terrible relationships that they don't want to be in, like whereas I think like talking about this stuff so individually is like one issue by issue is kind of sometimes doesn't let us deal with like some of the root causes of the problems, which is misogyny, but it's also like how it all works together. And in terms of like how I address that in my comedy, I don't know if I do like on purpose. It's just like the kind of stuff that I think about, So,
yeah. And what was you mentioned pitching the Audible original, and I want to ask a question in a minute, but you mentioned so pitching. What was the process like of creating it? Like, how did it work? Yeah.
So I wrote a book proposal, and then I got some feedback on my book proposal, and then I wrote another one, and then I got some feedback, and then that probably all went back and forth for like 6 months to a year. And then even writing it was very different than I thought. The actual process had changed a little bit from the proposal. Yeah.
And who was that feedback from? Was it from peers or was it from the people that you were pitching to?
The people I was pitching to, I was pitching to the person that edited it, my friend Rachel. She's a friend, but she's also an editor at Audible. We became friends through the process. She's amazing.
Yeah.
And she had, a huge impact on the way that the book turned out. And so, yeah, going back and forth with the person that I would say I really, co-created this with,
Yeah. And how did that come about? Like, was it something, did she see your live work or how did that work?
So I knew Rachel because Audible used to be based in San Francisco, and I knew her from when I started comedy in San Francisco. Right. Yeah. So, I just ended up knowing her from the San Francisco comedy scene. And then after that, I just kind of, once Audible was starting to kind of go into more of these audiobooks, we ended up exploring this project.
Yeah. And was there anything that you found surprising or challenging about the project, either in the process or dealing with the content that you just weren't expecting?
Yeah, I mean, it was very different than I thought it was going to be. I mean, when I pitched this, and started writing it, honestly, like I had a completely different life and than I did when I was actually writing the book. And then that kind of ended up being, what the book is about. I was, I think when I started it, I was in a place in my life where I felt like really good about everything, where, I felt like it's all going super well. And then the person that I was in a relationship with, like tragically died out of the blue. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm not writing my happy ending story right now. What the hell, So this ended up being, I think, a book that was a lot about how like grieving, and I don't want to undersell it in terms of like it's it has sad parts, but it's also funny.
It is.
But it's it did end up being like just kind of a lot of different conclusions and connections that I didn't expect that I would come to just because I changed so much as a person at the same time when I was writing it.
Yeah. And amazing that you managed to weave all that and produce what you did, because you can really see the shift in it. And it was so gripping to listen to because I didn't know where it was going in that sense, in the way that it was like kind of following along with the best kind of series where you care about the person who's authoring it as well, but you're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, like, but with still all the cohesiveness of the themes that you were dealing with. It's really I found it really affecting and really funny too. So
thank you, I appreciate it.
To you for making it so funny at the same time.
Thank you so much.
And I want to ask you about your special again, which super funny. I watched it on Amazon Prime, but it's in lots of different places, Apple TV, YouTube, other platforms as well. But but for people who haven't caught up with it yet, what was the kind of like the fuel behind your special? Like, what were you like really thinking about at the time and really wanting to explore? Because obviously I can see from the outside some interesting things, but I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I wrote I wrote Dirtbag Anthropology very much like during the pandemic. It took almost the whole quarantine period, which was like a year. Not the entire year, but most of it. And then after we didn't have to be, inside anymore, I went on tour and revived some of my material from right before and also wrote a bunch of new stuff. And this special was very much like the 2 years of my life after the pandemic, and kind of how that changed. So yeah, it was just kind of another iteration, I would say,
Yeah. And when you say like writing the special, what does that mean for you? Because like so many different people approach their processes differently, and you might have different processes for different projects. But say for the special, what was that process like for you? Do you literally write and test, or do you kind of write on stage in inverted commas?
Bit by bit, like as in like stand up bit by bit, like
literally bit by
bit. What I usually, literally bit by bit. So what I usually do, like there are usually like the last 2 times that I've had a special or an album, and probably will maybe do the 3rd time. I'm getting almost there. Is I will spend a while just kind of approaching individual stand-up bits. And then when I have enough that it's like about 80% to the amount of time I would need for a stand-up bit, I would think about, okay, what are the themes here? Like, what was I really trying to say, and what was going on in my mind? Like, what were some of the other, the underlying issues kind of running through my work, or, and then kind of sort of like begin to sort of pull it together. So, the actual bits of comedy and the jokes in this special, like those probably came from over a 3 to 4 year period, with, a lot of them coming from like 2021, 2022. But, like it was just like, I think I was really working to find like, I had most of it done, and then I was working to kind of think about like what the themes were, and how I could draw those out more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I got the impression from Dirtbag Anthropology that you seem to have like a strong sort of network of peers that you kind of challenge in conversation and who challenge you. Is that the same for your comedy? Do you also work with other comedians who are kind of challenging your work and giving feedback, or do you like to kind of just test it with the audience, or bits of both? How does it work for you in terms of feedback?
Bits of both. Yeah, I think that like bits of both, for sure. Like I definitely learned how to, like, for me, okay, when I've come up with all the angles that I can on a bit and it's been in the same place for a while, I very much will just ask my funny friends, comedians or not, like, hey, where do you think I could go with this? And most of the time it's not going to be something that'll make sense to me in the way that I thought about it. But sometimes that's like what, like opens it back up again and, can generate new ideas. So I'll do that pretty liberally. But most of the time I'll go on stage with like an idea of what I want to talk about, maybe a few jokes, and then the rest of the jokes will sort of develop over the time of doing it,
Yeah. And so many things I'd love to ask you, but one of the things is that you've toured with sort of big name comedians like Margaret Cho, and you featured with Maria Bamford as well. Are there any things that stick in your head from watching those comedians and how they deal with their own kind of personal material that you still kind of think about, or advice that they're given? Or do you feel like very much no, because you seem to have such an individual style as well? I'm like, are there specific things you'd be like, oh, that I feel I've learned, but no, this is
Dude, those women are both so different from each other.
They are.
And I'm not similar to either of them in terms of like my style necessarily, but they're both like so much themselves. And I think that is something that I did learn from them, is like, I just they just do what they want. Like they're not trying to kind of conform to a market. They were able to just be really true to their own artistic vision and then build a fan base from there. So, I think to me, like that always seemed like a good approach. Although I think there's definitely people that are just like churning out content every day and going super viral based on what goes viral. And a lot of those people are killing it. So your listeners may not want to take my advice on that.
So, yeah. No, but that's what I really love about your work, is it's so distinctive because you're not like them at all. Like, but it's interesting to know, that you're like them and that you're completely yourself. But it's interesting in terms of, like you mentioned, different fan bases, and I did wonder. I don't know if you have experience of it, but just if you have, how you've learned to deal with kind of pushback online or negative comments online, or those kind of things, particularly when you're really, being such a true artist and sharing yourself.
I mean, I haven't gotten a lot of pushback online and on, my comedy that much in a long time. Like, when I first started, it was like a lot of like incels and stuff being like, I guess there's still guys that do that, like in the comments, like they'll be like, you're so fat and ugly and old, and I'm like, I just don't even care anymore. Like I don't even read it most of the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I've definitely gotten a lot of pushback on the internet for saying other things that either were edgier jokes or not even jokes at all, like stuff I really believe. For example, that there needs to be a ceasefire in Gaza yesterday. I'll get stuff like, I'll get a lot of pushback on stuff like that. And, it's like, that can be draining, not so draining that I won't do it, but it's like, my attitude about like things that I would say or not, it's just like, would I stand by this? Like, if I wouldn't stand by it, if it's like a joke that's just like pointlessly offensive or mean or something like that, I'm not going to say it, but if it's something I believe, and I would be willing to defend the perspective of it, then sure,
Yeah. And what's some of your favorite comedy to either watch or listen to that listeners can also then go off and find potentially, whether it feel like it's overlooked or needs a shout out or just that you just love it?
Well, there's a comedian named Ian Abramson that I taped a special with on the same day. He's super funny. Trying to think, definitely make sure you check out Rami Youssef. He's so funny, and he's like a very exciting up and coming comedian right now. He's barely up and coming. He's really famous at this point, but in the past like couple of years, he's gotten really famous. So yeah, Rami, Ian Abramson. There's a guy named Dan Licata that's really funny. Some of my favorite women in comedy are Joe Firestone, Aparna Nancherla. There is a trans comedian named Jess Tom that I think is doing really interesting work. So yeah, those are just some names that come to mind right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. Loads to check out there. Thank you. And you mentioned actually filming your special. What do you think you learned from doing that? Like that process, because there will be people listening to the show that have just not had that experience yet. What did you learn from actually filming it? If anything.
It wasn't the first time I'd ever filmed something. I had filmed a few things before this. I would say if you are filming something, one thing that's like a good tip that someone gave me originally is if you mess up something, like if you stumble over a word or you forget something, you can literally just go back and redo it, and they can edit that out. Like you can do it again and just tell the audience you're doing again, and they'll laugh with you. I mean, so yeah, just you have more control over it than you realize.
Yeah. Okay, and this is slightly left field, but I read in like your bio that you've written jokes for Beavis and Butthead.
It's true, yeah.
It's true. How does that fit into this picture?
I mean, that's just like a really fun opportunity to do as a comedian. Just the parts that they have like comedians do punch up on, or where they're like the guys are like watching videos and we'll think of their riffs and stuff like that. And that's just a really silly, fun thing. They're such fun voices to write for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so is that how it worked? They literally asked you to come in and do punch up?
Yeah, we've done it on Zoom and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. And how did you get put forward for that? Like, is that something that you were able to do through your own relationships, or do you have like a manager who helps you with that? How does that work?
I don't know actually. Yeah, I think that they
Yeah.
had some comedians they just reached out to. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Amazing. Well, that's very fun. And last couple of questions I want to ask you before we wrap up is there anything that you would love to see talked about more in comedy? Not necessarily in terms
Yeah.
of content, but just in terms of like people being able to be part of different comedy worlds.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I would like to see comedians be like a little bit braver in terms of their political stances. There's never been an easier time to do that in some ways because a lot of people have their own audience online,
Yeah.
that can't really cancel you, or they will appreciate it if you are using your voice to support what is good and just, so I do wish people were a little braver sometimes,
Yeah.
um, but like in terms of like comedy things talking about, I don't know, the industry is changing so fast, it's gotten so much about like short content videos and it's, I think there's people that are really good at it. I am still very much learning, like, okay, how could I like I'm like trying to figure out like how do I produce like this much like video shit every day? Because even
Yeah.
just like the video stuff is like I'm not like that good at like videos,
Yeah.
so I'm trying to learn. I mean, I put my stand up online and stuff too, but I want to learn how to do like, more sketches and stuff like that, like the technical aspect of it, filming, lighting it, making the sound and stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's just like all part of it at this point,
Yeah.
it's a lot of free work. There's a lot of free work involved in being
Yeah.
a comic that like, maybe didn't used to be true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know, like, how far ahead can you think as, a writer and comedian? Like, do you know what next year looks like for you, or 3 years or 5 years? Because, like you say, it's changing so fast. Or are there things that you're like, oh gosh, if I get the chance though, or if I can see the paid opportunity, I really want to do this?
Well, I really want to write another book. Like I'm
Yeah.
starting to think about what that will be and also, a one person show. I'm starting to think about some like larger projects I want to do and they're not quite like fully incubated yet, but like and I'll be starting another podcast in the next couple of weeks here that,
Ooh.
check it out to I'll be having like kind of one-on-one conversations with people similar to Reply Guys, but
Hmm.
maybe a little bit more broad. And yeah, so those are some things
Yeah. And
that you can probably expect from me over the next year or so.
yeah. Have you got any inklings for the book? Like what it was like going to be kind of poking out or exploring, or can you not say yet? It's fine if you can't say.
I have a few ideas of things that I've been tinkering around with, but I don't want to talk about it yet because
Yeah.
I'm like, after I say it, I'm like, no, I don't feel like writing it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's no problem. Yeah, okay. Well, lots to look out for. Amazing. And before we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd love any of the listeners to like? Would you'd like them to encourage them to do this week? So there's such a mix of listeners who love comedy. They write. Some of them are writer performers, all different kinds of comedy. Is there any kind of prompt from your amazing brain that you'd love them to think about this week?
Okay, a prompt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, okay, trying to think of like what would be like a prompt. Um, I would say think about what is one of the times that like somebody came into your life that it was like a seemingly random interaction that ended up having like such a bigger impact
Mm.
than you thought, like somebody that like something that didn't seem like it was going to be a big deal but ended up being a big deal. Like I feel like that can be a
Mm.
good source of jokes. Yeah.
That is. That's because I immediately want to. As soon as we finish this conversation, I'm going to have to make a note to myself because I want to think about that. Because immediately, that's so super intriguing. I'd love to think how I'm going to answer that. What a wonderful prompt! Thank you. And
Thank
Kate,
you.
thank you for your amazing work and for taking the time today to delve into it a little bit with us. Where can people go to find out more about you and your creations?
So katewillett.com, 2 L's and 2 T's, and follow me on Instagram, kate.willett with 2 L's and 2 T's. I keep Instagram updated more regularly with shows and stuff, and hopefully we'll get to the UK sometime in the next year or two again. And this has been so fun. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.